Julia, could you record? Thank you.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to the Marine Recreational Fisheries Development Panel for May 20th, 2021. Before we begin the agenda, I'd like to have Commissioner Ron Amadon make a few comments.
Good morning, Chairman Bogdan, and thank you for allowing me to attend your meeting today and have a few words. It's good to see you, and it's especially good to see you up and running and functioning from your calamity. Goes to prove your true grit, sir. I have been very busy with lots of different stuff. Obviously, the DFW license fee rollout has been one of the big things on my plate recently. In fact, yesterday we had a briefing with the ENRA committee, which is the Environmental, Natural Resource and Agriculture Committee, part of the legislature. In that meeting, they asked if we would also be increasing the saltwater fee licenses. I explained to them that that was not under the DFW purview, that was under DMF and you folks, and that it is something that has been broached, and I'm sure conversations would be coming soon, and that I would make sure that I kept them up to speed with our conversations. Earlier this month, DMF had arranged for the secretary and I to have the opportunity to join the Center for Coastal Studies team on the research ship to observe the presence of right whales in Cape Cod Bay. It was an absolutely fascinating trip. I believe there were approximately 83 right whales present in the bay at the time, and we had as many as a dozen whales surface feeding right around the research boat at one time. So it was quite the sight to see, very educational. Glad that I had the opportunity to do that. I want to thank Director McKinnon for making sure that opportunity came to me. Our bi-weekly meetings with DMF are usually kind of like drinking from the proverbial fire hose. Mr. McKinnon takes a very deep breath at the beginning of those meetings and provides me with more information than I could possibly ever retain. But I appreciate that as well. And if you folks have any questions for me, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Thank you, Commissioner. Greatly appreciated. Okay, moving on, moving to the draft agenda. And I'm assuming everybody can hear me. Nicola, am I all set?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to have a motion for the approval of the May 20th, 2021 draft meeting agenda. And if you make a motion, please state your name first so that we know who was making the motion, and then we'll need a second. I have a motion, please.
Mike Piernock, motion to approve.
Thank you, Mike. Can I have a second?
Kevin Blinkoff, I'll second.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion on the draft agenda? Hearing none. All those in favor? Raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay, unanimous. Thank you so much. Well, right now, I'd like to have review and approve the December 17th, 2020 draft meeting minutes. Before we do that, though, I need to thank Nicola for taking care of that. Being a minute manager is not an easy task. I think we all have done that. And Nicola has a lot on her plate. And Nicola, again, has done a superb job with the draft meeting minutes. And I just want to thank her publicly for that, her efforts and for everything that she's doing. May I have a motion, please, to approve the draft meeting minutes for December 17th?
Mike Piernock, motion to approve.
Thank you, Mike. May I have a second, please?
Sure, second, Patrick.
Is there any further discussion, review, amendments, comments regarding the draft meeting minutes? Hearing none, let's move to the motion. All those in favor? Raise your hand, please. All those opposed? All right, unanimously approved. Thank you so much. Let's move on to the meeting itself. Item number 2 on the agenda is the fund accounting, and that'll be given by Kevin Crichton.
Thank you, Khalil. Good morning, everybody. I think Julie is controlling this, so you'll just hear me saying next quite a bit, but I'll try and keep this fairly quick. So I'm gonna, as noted in the agenda, give a fairly quick presentation on revenue and then spend it out of the rec fund. Next. Our revenue sources, you guys are all fairly familiar with this. We have 3 main sources of funds of revenue that go into the fund. Most comes from permit sales, the saltwater fishing and the for-hire permits. And then about 6 years ago, we began depositing MRIP reimbursements into this fund. And then we received donations to the fund, mostly from applicants receiving a no-cost permit. Next. Permit revenue. This is on average, we were bringing in about $1.25 million through fiscal year 17, but over the past 3 years, that's on average gone up to about 1.45 million. So this is probably one of the only positives to come out of COVID was the desire of folks to get outdoors, and we saw a decent bump up in permit sales in 2020. And I believe all you guys were on the call last April when, maybe it was May, when we had this meeting, first one virtually. And at that point, we had seen a decline of about 9% on permit sales in April.
Was you able to get that off, Matt?
Anyway, we wound up with like I said, a nice bump up by the end of the year. And so far for 2021, we seem to be tracking very close to those same sales that we had in 2020. We won't know until the end of June because June is our biggest month for permit sales. So as of right now, we're looking pretty good. Next. This is just a quick snapshot. A couple of years ago, maybe it was last year, Patrick had asked just for a snapshot of permit revenue by type that we ever go into the fund. So I kept this slide in. I just added 2020 to this. And the for-hire revenue, it's very steady year to year. It's always just around $60,000. And then the saltwater recreational permit revenue, that's been fairly steady with slow growth year after year. Next. And then MRIP reimbursements. Yeah, the formula changed on reimbursements, resulting in an increase back in 2017. And we were under a contract, 2-year contract at about $338,000 a year. A little extra was added in to cover a full-time phone interviewer. And I think, I don't know if she was on at this time last year, she's on now. We hired Kristen Thiebolt full-time in that role. And then over this past winter, as we were wrapping up our last year's MRIP contract, I worked with Dave Martins and Maggie Nazarinas from DMF, and we put together a much tighter budget that was based on actual costs of MRIP instead of the old way that they did it, which was a flat cost per assignment. And ASMSC ultimately agreed to our current contract, which is in place right now. We signed it in January for a total of just over $436,000 a year. So that was good. Next. And then the last source of revenue we got coming in is the donations. They have been fairly consistent around $40,000 per year. And as we saw permit sales go up, we also saw a bump up in donations. And right now they're averaging around $50,000 a year. Last year with the increase in permit sales during COVID, also increase in donations. So that was nice. And right now for 2021, we are once again looking at that that number of around $50,000 a year. Next. All right, so that's it on the revenue side and on expenditures. This is just a look back a little bit. I thought it might be useful. Back in 2018, we were spending about 33% of all permit revenue on public access, and the next largest category was MRIP at about 30%. And we noted in that year that we expected significant cost savings in MRIP as we moved from working with a temp agency to hiring contract employees directly. So then here in 2019, we saw that happen with the fund, the MRIP cost going down in 18 from 400K to 312K. And at that point, all costs were covered by reimbursements. Next. And then for last year, 2020, costs came due on Deer Island. So this is, we knew this was coming. That's what we expected. And about 2/3 of all spending out of the fund was on public access. So just note here, even though we did add an FTE to MRIP, that number dropped down primarily because of early in the pandemic, we did have to cancel a lot of assignments. And I'm sure Dave's going to give an update on MRIP. He'll talk a little bit about that. And then for FY21 this year, that is back. That's normalized, and we're back to what seems like a fairly normal year once again on all spending. Next. So you guys have seen this in previous years. I just update with the most recent figures. And if you focus on the fund end balance in that bottom row, you'll note that in FY 2020, over on the right, this was the first time that we saw a dip in the fund. Again, expected with the lion's share of costs on Deer Island coming due. And going forward into 2021, that'll change significantly as we're not going to have much coming out of the fund at all on public access. Next. So this is the current year we're wrapping up. These numbers I feel are fairly close. We know what permit sales are looking like. Again, June's a big month, so that number could drop by $200,000 or $300,000. I don't think that'll be the case. And we know MRIP and donations approximately where they're at. The expenditures are down significantly right now, about $1 million less than last year. And again, that's because we haven't had any large expenditures for public access. We haven't finished paying out Deer Island yet. Ross will have the figure, but I believe we're still owe around $400,000+. And our general counsel is working, I know with Ross and Doug have been involved with negotiations with MWRA on just how much of that final cost they're going to have to pick up. And whatever the balance is, it shouldn't be much. I'm guessing less than $100,000 will be the final payment out of the fund to wrap that project up. Next. And this is just a reminder to everybody that based on the legislation, we are required to spend 33% or a third of the appropriated permit revenue each year on public access. And we track that year to year to make sure that we're hitting that mark. And through FY 18-19, we were spot on, right where we needed to be. When you add in FY 20 and a large outlay of money on the Deer Island project, you can see that those numbers were driven up significantly. And just keep that in mind as this year, FY 21, as we wrap this year up, we're probably going to see numbers, percentages closer to 10 to 15%. It'll drop down much closer to what that FY 18 figure looks like, and bring those the overall average over the years of tracking this back to the roughly 33% that we're required to spend. Next. I'm not going to spend much time on this. We've looked at this before, and I know Ross has got a public access presentation. It's just, again, a reminder that right now, based on our current appropriation and revenue going into the fund, we are able to allocate about $300,000 a year for large public access projects. This is totally separate from other public access costs like personnel or supplies or smaller grant programs that we run. But what that means that the year that we're going into now, FY22, will be the last year that we're basically borrowing to wrap up the Deer Island project. Ross has already started on the next big public access project, and so with a down year or two, we'll bankroll those funds like we did back in 16 to 18 to have some sort of buffer as we go into those big spending years. Next. And this was just something as we had talked about, a couple of years ago. We wanted to ensure the solvency of the fund and perhaps even speeding the payback of some of these large public access projects. We presented this for consideration. We have had, as noted by Commissioner Amadon, we've met with him a couple of times now, and he's asked us to put together a slide deck. We already done one with one of the legislators, and the idea is that he wants to put together a type presentation that we can share with others, and probably especially the legislators, to do what we would need to do if we want to consider raising fees. And this is just based on last year's permit sales, what some of those scenarios would look like. The difference in revenue from what we brought in of the 1.5 million to changing the age structure or the fee structure. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And then down below, I just included what we would need to change with the aid of the legislature, because this would require a statutory change. And that is it for me. Any questions? Boy, Patrick, I can smell that cigar from here. Looks good.
Any questions, folks? Kevin, thank you so much, and it's good to see you.
Good to see you, Khalil.
Hopefully you're feeling much better also. Thank you.
Oh, I'm getting there. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, we have a question from Patrick. Patrick, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation, Kevin. I actually had a couple of questions, real simple ones. First one is roughly, can you give us a rough number on what the total individual permit sales are? I couldn't, the graph sort of had me as we went by it.
Yeah.
I just missed a note.
Sure. If you look right here, actually go back to the very last slide, Julia. So that's the 155. That's paid permits. So that's just take the zero off the end, and that's how many permits we sold, paid permits we sold last year. But if you give me a second, I can pull up the actual numbers, all of them.
I don't know what the subject was.
Well, I'll get you that number, Patrick. It's about
Yeah, that's
180,000. Actually, here it is. Last in 19, it was 195,000, and last year went up to about I think it was 213.
Awesome. And another question was, and it's really coming out of a management question, not really a fund question. There were suspicions or worries that when the slot limit went in, when the striped bass slot limit went in, that we may see individual anglers using the for hire permit as a way to get around regulations. Did we see any bump in the for hire permit registrations over the last 2 years?
They actually went down.
Okay, thank you very much. I was just, like I said, I was wondering.
Yeah, those numbers are pretty steady, but they did go down. They dropped a little bit last year.
And a final question or comment is, do we expect, or are you thinking at all about, there's obviously been a bump due to COVID in permit sales and experiencing the outdoors. Are we expecting that could level off at some point somewhat? Because that would, my thought is that as things go back to quote unquote normal, that we could see it go down a little bit. And I just want to make sure we're thinking about that when we're talking about projecting.
Sure. I think that the good thing, pre-COVID, we could see a steady increase. It's up and down a little bit, but we were still averaging, the 3 to maybe 4% growth. And we know that at some point that's gonna level off, and you'll probably see it tick down a little bit. But Christine is going to give a presentation shortly on, I believe, R3 today, where we are working with a new vendor on a permitting vendor, which has a lot of neat features and a great outreach tool. So there's going to be a lot more engagement with DMF and the fishing community to hopefully retain those anglers. Yeah, we saw a bump, like a lot of others did, with outdoor activities last year with COVID. I can tell you that so far this year, and I know that we're still under restrictions, the numbers have been tracking the same as last year. They haven't dropped back down to the 18, 19 levels. So fingers crossed it hangs in that same area.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Thank you.
One other thing, Patrick, that may make up for residents maybe not purchasing as much as they did last year is our out-of-state permit sales dropped precipitously because no one was traveling. Not that they make up a huge portion of our permits because of all the reciprocity we have, but that'll add, a few tens of thousands to the permits if out-of-staters come back again.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Mike. I also think that some of the more, there's clearly been an increase in the efficiency of the way that the environmental police have been using social media and whatnot to advertise enforcement actions. And I think that or promote, what they've been doing. And I actually think that affects those that have been skirting the license. I know I brought this up before, but I remember the conversations about that North Carolina and Florida had thought that it was like 4 to 7 years or something to get to max compliance. So hopefully it's not a false pump, but my concern is that we're making sure that we're prepared in case it is.
Any other comments? Kevin, thank you so much again. Kevin, is it possible for this PowerPoint to be sent to the panel?
Sure. Yeah, Nicola's going to share them all with the panel.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Thanks again.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay. At this point, we'll move to item number 3, the FY21 project review by Michael Armstrong. And then once he's finished with his presentations, he will then introduce the other portions of the item 3 agenda items. Michael.
Thank you, Khalil. Good morning, everyone. I think we can get right into it. First slide. So first I'll talk about striped bass research, and this is being conducted by Ben Gahagan for the genetics, and Bill Hoffman's taking the lead on the terminal tackle mortality studies. And these were both funded out of the fund last year. So I'll give you a brief update. I want to move quickly, and I've instructed staff to move quickly because we don't want to be here forever. But please don't underplay how important these 2 pieces of research are, because they are really great. So let me get right into it. So Ben's doing this, and this is actually part of his dissertation. We funded a little, I think, 2 years ago, and then we funded $65,000 last year. So that's going right to genetics. He has published a paper in a very important journal on the genetics so far. He was the researchers featured in On the Water. Thank you, Kevin. He just presented at Mass Bass in April, and he's scheduled to speak at a striped bass symposium at the AFS meeting. Next slide. So I'll summarize the findings here. This is so neat. They look at these tiny pieces of DNA called single nucleotide polymorphisms, and it's the latest and greatest genetic technique working with a researcher in New Brunswick. So it's hard to explain, but the different colors obviously mean different. The different mixes show completely different genetic stocks. which means they're separated reproductively. So we sampled all the way from Canada to Cape Hatteras, and what you see on the far right is Canada. So the Miramichi? Thank you. Came out completely separate genetically, which means it's not mixing down here. There may be some migration, and then whatever the Shoe River is, and then the St. John River. So all the Canadian rivers are very isolated. And then this isn't going north to south completely. So the Hudson, as we have always said, comes out as a separate genetic stock, and they're all over our waters. And then a bunch of rivers. So the Delaware Bay, Chesapeake main stem, the Potomac, the Rappahannock, the James, the Choptank, and the Nanticoke, all in Chesapeake Bay, except for the Delaware, all come out genetically the same. And the Delaware is connected with a canal up at the northern part of the Chesapeake, and there's a lot of movement there. So that's what homogenizes the genetics. And then the Roanoke and Cape Hatteras populations, as we've been treating them, is a separate stock. But the important part of this is you can run a lot of samples quickly and fairly cheaply. So what Ben's doing with this money is we've been collecting 3,000 samples by various means from our fisheries and from sampling. And what he's going to do is run all those, and it was actually used to leverage some money from ACCSP too for 100,000. And the end goal is for us to be able to, through a stratified sampling program, collect genetics every year from key states and be able to assign our catch to the stock it came from. When we're able to do that, we can then use Gary Nelson's two-stock model, which right now we assess as one stock. And you look at the genetics, that's not true. We're lucky we get away with it. If this comes to fruition, and we think it will, we will be able to assess the Hudson and the Chesapeake Bay separately. And that'll be a tremendous leap forward for the management of the stock, because that model was rejected because of the uncertainty in assigning fish to different stocks. So I'll leave it at that. This could be a watershed event in the management of striped bass, the assessment. So it's pretty cool. Next slide. I'll talk about the acoustic telemetry study we're doing. So we're comparing jay and circle hooks. So while we catch them, and so we're fishing with bait and mixing jay hooks and circle hooks. And when we release them, we also take temperature, angler skill level, fight time, handling time, release time, and then an element of, I don't think I kept the slide in, of the injury level of the fish, ranging from a nice lip hook to, a gill hookup or a esophagus hookup with blood pouring out the gills. Next slide. So the tags we used have an accelerometer in them, so we can tell when the fish is swimming. It really reflects tail beats. So this is what it looks like. The graph on the bottom is what a live fish looks like. Next slide, please. That's what a dead fish looks like. It swam for a little bit, and you can look, it survived. It survived about 2 days and then died. So some of these fish are not dying right away. And that's a whole nother piece of the study that is cool, and there'll be a whole nother paper out of that. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the assignment of the damage level. And the reason we collect all these ancillary data is we can model it, and then we can base the number of fish that are going to die just on the condition of the fish when you release them, instead of having to do acoustic studies all the time. Next study, next thing. So this is the coverage in Beverly Salem Sound. This is where we're conducting the study. We catch all the fish there, we release them. And so the coverage is tremendous. So to the east is what we call a gate. A fish has a very low probability of getting through these receivers without being picked up. We can't gate off the whole area. As it is, it's just a tremendous amount of coverage. And these things cost $2,000 each, these receivers. But again, we pick fish up all over the place. So we have 30 in Beverly Salem. We have 14 up at Cape Ann on the off the east side of P-Town called Peaked Hill. We have 4, and the Cape Cod Canal, we have 2 at each end that act as a gate. So they really can't go through the canal without us seeing them. Next slide. This is the length frequency of what we tagged, and it pretty much reflects what's in the fishery right now. You see the strong year class at around 58 to 60 centimeters, and that's the 2015 year class. We would have liked to tag more big fish, and in spite of us fishing really hard, they're just not there. Everyone knows that. Those are the poor year classes between 2011 and 2015 coming through. Next slide. Yep, go ahead. These are the kind of data you get, and I just want to see how cool these things. Black means we're picking up the fish or the tag, but there's no beats. So all the black ones are dead fish, and all the orangish ones are live fish swimming at various speeds. Next slide. So we detected 176 tag bass we caught. We detected 156 in Beverly Salem. A handful did not get detected, and we're investigating that. The Cape Ann array, 140 fish. So a lot of the fish exited Beverly Salem Harbor and went north, probably following bait. Cape Cod Canal, which shows them exiting, we caught 125. So of 176 fish, there were 20 some odd dead ones. So the vast majority of fish exit our waters through the Cape Cod Canal. And then Peaked Hill picked up a fair amount too. So we're still analyzing the data. The problem is we have some fish we did not see, and Bill went out with a passive acoustic receiver and actually found some in the bay, which means the fish died, it decomposed, which means it died shortly after being caught, dropped to the bottom, was not close enough to an acoustic receiver. He picked up, so he picked a few of those up, and some are just, we haven't picked them up, but these fish will also be picked up all along the East Coast by a whole bunch of arrays from other researchers, and we all share the data. So that data is still coming in. So we can't do the analysis yet till we're confident we have all the data back of J-hook versus circle. But overall, depending on the assumptions you make, the back of the envelope, total mortality for both hooks is 8 to 16%. So, you know, the initial cut here is the 9% we use is not outlandish, and it's probably pretty close to accurate. And I'll leave it at that. And we can take questions at the end of all these things. Well, I guess we could take them now if anyone has questions, or we can take them offline or later on if you want.
Any questions from the panel members?
I'm not seeing any hands.
I have a question. But, Michael, thank you. I'm sorry, I just cut someone off. Michael, very interesting information, and I love the one with the study with the DNA. That's really kind of interesting data right there, and it's going to be a watershed, I think, as you said. Regarding the telemetry, does each tagged fish have its own? Does each tag, I should say, have its own fingerprint? Or
yes. It transmits a unique ID and it downloads quickly the accelerometer stored data.
Okay, so each fish then, each fish could be swimming around maybe I didn't say it correctly, but does each tag have its own particular number? Let me ask that. In other words, you put a tag on a fish, the next tag you put on, is it going to say? I don't know. How to
Yes.
ask the question.
Yeah, I think what you're getting, yeah, we can look at the detections and say that was this fish.
That's
This
right.
was the condition that we released it, and this is the size that we released it at. And that will also occur all along the East Coast. They'll put all those data into a shared database.
Okay.
Yeah.
Understood. Thank you so much.
We have a
All right.
question from Patrick.
Yeah, Mike, a very general question.
Mhm.
Every time that the presentation about these studies gets done in public, people seem to hear there's overwhelming support clearly out of the community for this work. My question is simple. Do you have enough money to do what you want to do?
Well, I'll put it very simply, no. We are going to, when I get to the budget, I'm proposing that we will continue this study because we're realizing our sample size, even though 176 fish, the sample size is small. We're trying to make these decisions. So I think we funded that. Well, I pulled some money from other sources. I think we did around 85,000 out of the fund, and I threw in another 30,000, something like that. Wasn't really enough to answer the question as well as we wanted to. So we're going to request doing it again to bump up the sample size. Unfortunately, each one of these tags is $600 and the receivers are $2,000. So it ramps up pretty quickly.
We have a question from Mike Pearnock. Mike, you can unmute yourself.
And thank you, thank you, Mike. Once again, Mass DMF leads the way, and I want to thank DMF. I want to thank those organizations that are supporting this. This is good data, good stuff. We'll have to talk offline. I could talk for hours about this. I'm very interested in it. The one question I do have is that you say the preliminary indications are that we will be able to use this to separate out the stocks. We've seen such things occurred in the future then to the detriment of us because it's going to change its quotas and seasons and bag limits. Do you have any sense with what you see, whether that would be the case or whether we'd have status quo or possibly more liberalization of seasons and bag limits?
Oh, I don't know where it's leading. The management will become more complicated. That's the problem. And I think this is what you're asking. One of the main findings so far is at any given time or place, you may be fishing on Hudson River fish in the spring on schoolies, and later in the year, you'll be fishing on Chesapeake Bay fish. And it's going to probably change every year, and it's going to change based on year class strength relative to each of the spawning areas. So the management will be complex. I suspect if I'm still sitting on the board, we'll try to treat all states the same. Because even right now, we know some states take a lot of bass and some don't take many, but we treat them all the same. So I don't think the management will change much. It'll be the assessment and our relative feel for the status of all the stocks that will change. Does that answer your question, Mike?
Yeah, no, thank you. And just one additional comment. This is all about money. We wish we had more money. We could do more and more and more. Believe me, I wish we could. Your observation with the Canadian fish, I would be more curious with it, but I don't. You don't have the ability to do this, I don't believe, with your research. But if you took the striped bass samples from New Brunswick and up there, what is that representing? Is that indicating that those fish are from the U.S. and migrating up there? Because, I think you're aware that there's no lack of them, and now there's a fishery up there, and they're destroying the salmon runs, and they want to get rid of them. So I don't know whether there's any collaboration that could be done with Canada, but I just throw that out as a question and a point to make. Thanks.
Okay, and we are working with a New Brunswick researcher, so it does sort of insert us into the Canadian stuff. So why don't we move on?
Thank you, Mike.
And the next presentation will be by Dave Martins and the MRIP project. Go ahead, Dave.
All right, great. Thanks, everybody. Good to see everyone, and thanks for this opportunity to present results of the MRIP survey back in 2020. So the first thing we need to talk about is that the survey was temporarily postponed due to the coronavirus. So this indicates here which days and months the survey was postponed. We started back up when we thought it was safe to be out there sampling and interacting with the public. We started back up on May 20th. So that was the Wednesday before Memorial Day. Memorial Day is indicated here as May 25th. It's indicated here in blue. So that's when we started sampling again last year. Again, this was based on reduction in infection rates and reduction in mortalities that was occurring in May when we felt it was safe enough to be out there. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this next slide is just what our schedule was for 2020, the sampling schedule. And you can focus on the last column here in the light blue, and it's the total number of assignments, base number of assignments that we get from NOAA Fisheries to do in our state. And then you see the third row is an indication of how many additional assignments that Mass DMF funds. And again, the whole goal is to increase the precision and accuracy, increase the number of data, increase the number of anglers that we're interviewing to improve the precision and accuracy of the estimates of catch that we're producing from this survey. And the past few years, we've been changing our strategy on how we add additional sample throughout the year. And we've been adding more assignments, more survey assignments, more field outings, if you will, on the shoulders of the wave. So we're doing a higher number of samples in May and June. We're doing less during the peak months of July and August, and also bumping up how many survey assignments we do in the fall. And again, it's to increase the precision and accuracy of the estimates that we're getting. We don't add as many during the peak months anymore because we're already obtaining a sufficient amount of data during that time. So we're focusing on the times of the year when we're not getting as much data. And then you can see we did about 800 NOAA base assignments. We added about 400, and then the total is about 1,200 survey assignments for the whole year. Next slide, please. All right, so in order to get out into the field and interact with the public and sample safely, the states all got together and had meetings together with the ACCSP, and we came up with safe sampling guidelines. And it's all the typical stuff, you know, maintain social distance, wear a mask, wash your hands often, sanitize. But of course, it includes additional things like, you know, wash down your gear often, you know, your fish measuring board, your sampling buckets, all that stuff. And, you know, try not to approach large groups of anglers. And if any anglers appear ill, do not approach them, because the safety of our field interviewers was what was most important here. But the point is, we were able to sample safely throughout the year with these guidelines in place. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so this next table compares the number of assignments that we had on our schedule versus what was completed. And the focus here is on the months of April and May. So we had 69 assignments on our schedule in April, 170 on our schedule in May. We didn't complete any in April, so 100% canceled. In May, we only canceled, we canceled 60% of the assignments because we started back up in June. And we completed 69 actually, but then the rest of the year was fairly normal as far as the shoreside sampling with just our typical number of cancellations, small number of cancellations throughout the year. So this is how coronavirus affected the MRIP survey in 2020. Next slide, please. Okay, so this next slide just shows you the number of interviews that we gathered in the field all months throughout 2020. And then the total number of interviews was 5,403. So it actually wasn't that much of a change compared to 2019, even though we didn't sample any of April and a majority of the month of May. We actually had slightly higher number of interviews, like, plus 20 something, 28 interviews in 2020 compared to 2019. Okay, next slide. So this next slide just shows you the blue bars are how many interviews we collected each month in 2019. The orange bars are the number of interviews that we collected in 2020, just to show you what the difference was between the 2 years. So you can see the fluctuations. And of course, May was significantly down as far as the number of interviews in 2020 compared to 2019. June was a normal month, but that's where the biggest increase this year compared to last year. And then, the rest of the months, you see the results there, fairly normal trend from what we do each year. Next slide. All right, this is the number of interviews collected each month and by fishing mode. Remember, there's 4 types of recreational fishing in the recreational fisheries survey science world. We call those fishing modes. So there's the shore fishing mode, private boat fishing mode, charter boat fishing mode, and headboat or party boat fishing mode. So this just illustrates that a majority of our interviews are coming from private boat anglers. In second place is the shore anglers at 920 interviews collected. And then charter anglers for the whole year, we collected close to 600 interviews. And of course, private boat was 3,895, almost 4,000 interviews collected from private boat anglers. Okay, next slide. Okay, our headboat sampling is what took the biggest hit in 2020 compared to 2019 due to COVID. We didn't sample pretty much the entire year as far as headboats. However, we did get out in the month of July. So this top row indicates how many trips we had on our schedule each month, and we had 88 trips scheduled for the whole year, but we only completed 11 trips. So July was the only month that we felt it was safe enough to venture out on these boats, to be in close proximity to the public. And this was sort of a trial run, sort of like a pilot experiment. And then we decided, okay, at the end of July, we're going to get together and see, do we feel whether or not it's safe to be sampling out there? And next slide, please. And what we determined that it really wasn't that safe to be out there. The boats still had many anglers. It was very difficult to socially distance. And once the boat got underway and started fishing, most of the anglers took their masks off. Despite the travel restrictions in place, there were anglers from all different states aboard these boats. Anglers from, on this particular trip that I sampled, there were anglers from Vermont, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Massachusetts, around, the metro Boston area of Massachusetts. So, we convened, Greg Scollin, myself, John and Matt, and Mike Armstrong, and just decided that it probably wasn't safe or wise to continue headboat sampling for the rest of the year. And actually, we were the only state up and down the entire coast that actually tried sampling on headboats. No other state of the 13 coastal states from Maine to Georgia sampled headboats in 2020. And I should say, this is a big loss of data. We really weighed this heavily on whether or not to sample, because you have to remember that headboat sampling is our only source of actual counts of recreational discards, right? This is the only time we're actually out on a vessel counting discards by anglers and actually measuring those discards. So that's where we get the size composition of what recreational anglers discard in our state. It's that only source of data. And of course, we didn't have it in 2020. But again, we got to put this in context. This is, a pandemic that happens every 100 years. So, there's really not much anyone can do about that situation. All right, next slide, please. All right, so however, we did, or NOAA Fisheries did come up, and their statisticians did come up with some strategies on how to deal with the gaps in data in 2020 due to the coronavirus. So overall, actually, the impacts were lower than what was expected after they put all the statistics together. And then those gaps in data were filled with 2018 and 2019 data. So we call that proxy data or replacement data or imputed data. Those are just all various terms for the same thing. You're basically substituting using averages from previous years. And those proxy data match the time, the place, and the fishing mode. And those data are combined with observed field data to produce the estimates in 2020. And then one nice thing, if you go to research what the 2020 catches were for all the different species in Massachusetts, statisticians at NOAA are including what percent of the data, what percent of that estimate contains the imputed data, right, to produce the estimates. So that's indicated, and you can see that in this next slide. And here's just one example. I'm not going to run through every single species in the state, but this is just the estimates from 2020 of black sea bass that were caught in our state, and it's just the harvest, right? I'm not looking at the discard here. And then you'll see the statisticians at NOAA have added a column at the end here, the contribution of imputed data to the catch estimate. And you can see they were actually pretty low. So again, the impacts of not sampling in April and May and not sampling headboats came out to be fairly low when they used this new method of producing the estimates using the proxy data or the imputed data. It's the best that we could come up with, but what you can see is it actually works fairly well. Next slide, please. Okay, and that's all I have for today. Thank you. I'll take any questions.
Mike Pearnock, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Dave. As a result of COVID, we all know and understand the impact we observed to the for-hire fleet with the early season and how no one were basically going. With the observation or the way and the approach that was taken to ultimately come up with the final number, I'm assuming that's rec and for-hire, and that if you did separate out the for-hire, what does that show? Because I'm curious whether, as a result of that initial hit and things didn't really start going until they opened up hotels per se. How did it turn out in the end, just for the for-hire end?
So on the for-hire end, the charter boats took less of a hit than the party boats, because again, we only sampled 1 month, and in fact, no other states sampled. So a higher percentage of their catch estimates for 2020 used the imputed data or the proxy data, however, whatever term you want to use. So those are some pretty high percentages there. But again, there was nothing else we could do. But with charter vessels, we missed a lot less of the season because they weren't allowed to operate until the end of May sometime. And we had already begun sampling at that time. So the percentage of imputed or proxy data for the charter boat fleet is going to be much less because we were out there sampling that fleet when it started up.
Okay, I'll have to talk to you more further offline. I have a few more questions, but thank you, David.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions?
I'm not seeing any other hands.
All right, let's
Thanks, David. Yeah.
Thank you.
let's move on to information and education. That'll be Christine Cassidy and Kim Fine.
Hey everyone. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen, so hopefully. Here we go. Apologies. Okay, can everybody see the presentation?
Yes.
Great, thanks so much. Just a quick caveat, my particular Zoom account, for whatever reason, will mute me randomly. So if all of a sudden you can't hear me, could you just raise your hand or send me an alert? It happens quite often, so advanced apologies. So Kim Fine and I put this presentation together, and I'll just start off pretty simply with our planned program for 2020. It occurred to me as we were putting this presentation together that we needed to speak to all of you about what happened in 2020. And while we want to share what's happening right now, I do realize that we're in the 2021 year. So we'll speak to all of the project work that happened that got us to where we are today. So our planned programming for 2020 included the new Take Me Saltwater Fishing Initiative, which I will talk about a bit more in this presentation. We had a targeted start date of this program of March 2020. It is an in-person adults training program, which was canceled at that time because it was built to be very hands-on. We didn't have the opportunity to really think about and design it for a Zoom. So we did move that to this year. This program also has a brand new youth fishing guide. And we also moved the printing publication of that to this year. We really had no concept of how distribution of that particular guide would happen. Likewise, angler education, we spoke with a lot of members throughout the state on how something with angler education might be able to happen in 2020, and we just were never able to get approvals on in-person social distancing. So Kim did have 11 clinics planned last year, starting from late May through September, and all of those were canceled. We did have additional talks with the state about pop-up clinics. We purchased brand new DMF tents early last summer. So we had hoped to be present at the canal at some boat launches, just handing out sort of a mini fishing show, for a lack of a better term. And unfortunately, that was also denied. So we had a lot of trouble figuring out how to shift our programming away from the in-person. We also had planned some Facebook Live to really highlight some of the different programs throughout DMF, sort of a seminar series of sorts where we would have the opportunity to set up a Q&A with some of our biologists, even perhaps doing some things at various sites. So diadromist was one of the options that we were looking into, to actually go and visit some of the various dams and fish ladders. And again, with social distancing, we were put on hold, but we are hoping to start those up this summer. So our completed programming shifted very much to an office type situation. That youth field guide that we had ready for publication last year actually went through 4 more iterations. So we basically wrote a book last year, and it just went to the printer yesterday, so we can start distribution this year. We also finished, apologies, I flipped these. So we finished the design of the Take Me Saltwater Fishing. I'll talk a little bit more in the next slide on why the design of that particular program changed. And then for the DMF specific saltwater education programming, Kim and I worked really hard on thinking about what that looks like, different audiences we would like to market that to in the 2021-2022 year. So we redid all of that programming. And then we also started a lot of different projects trying to identify various survey and app applications that we could use to collect more data from our recreational population. Specifically, we're looking to gather information on what species people are catching, where, so in similar to an MRIP, but more easygoing. There are various apps that are already present. So we looked into fish rules. We're exploring our options for allowing people to not only share their recreational catch data with us, but also promote the Derby, promote various recreational programs like the cod haddock avoidance. So we've been doing a lot of research into that in conjunction with the new Mass Fish Hunt website. So really looking into the different ways that we can utilize these platforms to promote all of these new programs that we've written. Because really no point in writing all of these if we can't market them and get people signed up. So that's the majority of our time that we spent last year. All of this really came about, Kim and I have been active in the R3, so the Recreational Boating and Fishing Foundation. The 60 and 60 promotion was looking to get 60 million recreational anglers throughout the United States in 60 months. So the program ran for 5 years. It is ending in 2021. However, R3 is going to continue moving forward. Kim and I recently went to the annual seminar in February. And a lot of the program work that we're building now is directly related to this angler recruitment, retention, and reactivation project. So I'll show you in a moment what the 2020 permitting looked like. We do have a lot of new and reactivated anglers. And so we're really focused on figuring out different ways that we can entice people to continue fishing, get into the sport. So let's go ahead and cover that. So the retention, recruitment, reactivation goals that we have as an agency is to increase recreational fishing awareness through social media and other outreach platforms. So as I just mentioned, looking into different app publications that we can utilize to collect that data from people, and also the new Mass Fish Hunt will offer us plenty of opportunity for not only registering people directly on that platform for different programs, but also providing us with follow-up survey data so that we can really get a handle on what it is our population enjoys programming-wise and where the needs are. We also want to engage new audiences with more family-friendly programming. So we've shifted a lot of our focus into really building those community pockets of youth anglers. The Take Me Saltwater Fishing program is one of those examples. And also engaging women in saltwater angling and giving women the tools to go and take their family out. Increasing online sales purchases. Again, this goes along with the new Mass Fish Hunt website. We want to really focus on improving that whole customer experience is paramount. So Kim and I are on that panel that's working with the new software designers to make sure that we not only understand how to utilize that software, but that we can eventually build our own programs into the Mass Fish Hunt. And then we also want to, with the new Mass Fish Hunt, we want to continue to track engagement with not only our .gov delivery service, the Granicus service, so we want to start utilizing that to really be getting some of these programs out and build that awareness, but again, also utilizing the new Mass Fish Hunt. So it hopefully goes without saying, we're really excited for January when we can really start moving and utilizing these new programs to promote. So I'm just going to quickly talk about that family-friendly programming here today. So this is what, I know Kevin covered it, but these are the permit numbers throughout the years. As you can see, the percent change between 2019 and 2020 was almost 9%. Historically, some of the higher changes between years in permitting has been around 4 and 5%. So everything we said and thought about the pandemic pushing people to outdoor recreate is true. So we have those numbers. So here you can see, so it's resident and non-resident. So I use those acronyms, so apologies on that. You can see the saltwater fishing non-resident. Obviously that went down because of various parameters with it. The 60 plus non-resident went down quite a bit, but you can see our biggest boost was actually in that 16 to 60. We saw a 16% increase. There's the actual count of anglers between the years. And so again, here's just a comparison. The previous year, 2018 to 2019, that percent change was just about 4%. Same here, 2017 to 2018, around 2%. Angler age, this remains pretty consistent. The under 20 is pretty small. So we're hoping to bring in some more youth anglers. And we really will only be able to note those numbers through particular family programming surveys, because if they're 16 and under, obviously we won't catch them on this. But that 40 to 59, 20 to 60 is our biggest permit holder there. And then angler location, we saw that Boston, this is 2020, we saw that Boston actually had the highest number of permits. It doesn't come as quite a shock. I think this was one of the first years at Boston, and it includes, when we say Boston, that includes a lot of locations from those permits. But the Deer Island Pier is certainly going to be something that we're really going to push and promote and do lots of programming on, because it's nice to see people in this more city-wide area becoming interested in the saltwater permits. So this data helps us to target locations and figure out not only the pockets, but where we might have the highest number of people registering and joining us for programming. So Deer Island is just really exciting for us here in saltwater education. So in 2020, we built the saltwater education to have actually two different programs. So we have the angler education program, which Kim Fine manages, and that will look and feel pretty much the same. Those are the in-person DMF-driven education and content. We market and manage it through all of our own channels. And we'll also continue to partner with some various organizations throughout the state, the Cape Cod Canal Museum being one of the examples. We love working with them. So angler education, while we've changed some of the programming and opportunities for engagement at the actual tents, that program has remained relatively the same. Take Me Saltwater Fishing, this initiative is pretty different because we will be working with adult anglers, either experienced anglers or new to the sport adults who want to take youth fishing. So these are the parents on a street who, are looking for summertime activities for their kids. These are camps that have easy access to the shoreline. These are boys and girls clubs, libraries. We've even seen some interest from fire stations throughout the state. Adult anglers who want to get their own youth fishing groups going. DMF is going to be the managing group that teaches these adults the basics of saltwater angling, mainly from shore and pier. We're also going to be providing them with youth guides, the saltwater fishing youth guide that we just wrote, and gear, as well as free rod and reel loans. So this kind of gives you the overall picture. So our DMF angler education, this is like very much our opportunity to work one-on-one with some of our constituents. This is very family-based, fun. We're gonna try out some different pop-up clinic opportunities this summer. So, we will be down at Cashman Park this Saturday. Come join us, check it out. And then also very specific, like we're going to be doing a program with the Boating and Safety Foundation. Sign up today. Take Me Saltwater Fishing, however, we wanted to increase our reach. So you can see this umbrella is much bigger. By training the adults who then can work with their own groups, our scope becomes that much bigger. And it also can offer us the opportunity to really foster some community pockets of youth fishing. So both of these introduce new anglers into the sport and increase access. So this was the 2020 schedule of programming that we had for DMF fishing clinics last year. All of them were canceled. So as you can see, Kim was able to really start, you can notice a lot of them are partnerships. So that was really exciting. We are working, Kim's working with all of these organizations again this year to see with Governor Baker's announcements last week about the mask mandate. Kim is working really hard to set these up so that we can really support them as best we can and offer them these clinics. So I'm just going to give you a quick view of the Take Me Saltwater Fishing. Just this week, I started working with some adult anglers, getting them started. We've been doing introductory meetings. We're setting up times for them to schedule gear loan, to pick up their books. So this is just starting this week. But the Saltwater Fishing Field Guide, this went to printer yesterday, which is still wild to me. This is written at the middle school level, and it goes through everything. On this slide, down on the bottom left, you can see a video icon. We also just finished production with Shields Design Studios on videos where you can just quickly jump, and then you can actually see everything in this book. You can see us tying these saltwater knots, setting up the tackle, casting. So this book has both a very specific layout for getting you fishing, and then you can watch the videos. It has more youth directed tips and tricks for 9 species. And then probably I'm most excited about this. We're really encouraging kids to journal and log all of their fishing trips. So at the end of the book, they have 16 entries where they can log their first fishing trips. So that is the end of the presentation. I'm trying to think if there was anything I was going to speak to that maybe I've missed. So go ahead and ask questions if there's something didn't cover in that.
Yeah, Christine, there's one more thing. We wanted to hit them hard with circle hooks last year, and of course we couldn't. So we're going to pilot. I think me and Christine are going out Memorial Day weekend to Cashman Park, which is one of our busier ramps, set up our big tent and give away circle hooks and other information and see what the reception is. And if it's you know, we feel like it's effective, we'll expand it throughout the state at busy ramps during busy times.
Yes, thank you, Mike, for that reminder. Again, it was a little difficult. I was curious to know how much I should go into plans for 2021. But we do also have specific striped bass posters that are being distributed out to tackle shops throughout the state. So when their saltwater guides are delivered, we also have these new posters that go over all of the striped bass regulations, including circle hook, and yeah, brand new tents. So we're hoping to set up at the canal. Cashman Park is where we'll be on Memorial Day. So we don't know if it'll be Saturday or Sunday. We're going to wait and see what the weather's like. But Matt was nice enough to set that up with the harbor master. So we're excited to see if these like mini fishing shows will work out.
Christine, you have a question from Patrick. Patrick, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Christine. First is a question. Have you guys done anything, or do you have any plans regarding both foreign language speaking communities and also the inner city?
Yes. To both. So the Saltwater Fishing Youth Guide that I just showed you is being translated into Spanish, and it will be printed and also displayed on our website. So thankfully, Kim has a really great relationship with the Hispanic Access Foundation. I don't think it's foundation. Apologies on that.
The Hispanic Access Foundation. So
Foundation.
yeah, I've been working with them for a little bit. Trying to get a clinic together and reaching out to the communities in Lowell and Lawrence. And tentatively this year, the pastor has to nail down a date, but we'll be doing a virtual clinic with them so far, reaching out to the community and teaching them knot tying and casting. proper fish handling, and we've been working with them just to translate some documents for us or with us.
And then specifically speaking to metro region areas, again, I just can't say enough how excited we are to have Deer Island opening. So we'll be working with a lot of boys and girls clubs. We're reaching out to library systems within the metro area and seeing if we can set up specific pop-up clinics for them, but also encouraging them to enroll adults within the population and to take me saltwater fishing. The more confidence we can instill in adult anglers and adult leaders within the community to take their kids out saltwater fishing, we think that that's going to be the biggest scope and reach that we can do. So 100%. We're also looking into next year having the guides translated into Portuguese, and then potentially Mandarin as the fourth language option, but it is difficult to nail down translators for that particular scope of work.
Gotcha. Awesome. Thanks. So I just is from the perspective of feedback. So it would be a shame. It would be a shame to be open in Deer Island and not to have a focus of events on the Chelsea, Everett, and East Boston communities. I know there are boys clubs there. I know there are there's at least a Spanish community center in Chelsea. And I think that that's I think that it would be wise to take a look to try and work with some of that community there. I also, at the same time, looking at the southern end of the city of Boston, with both the UMass Boston campus being a fishing destination that I'm sure if we drove there right now, we'd see people fishing, and the Castle Island Pier, I would strongly suggest the Roxbury Boys and Girls Club and the Reggie Lewis Center as potential partners. But I really do, and I've harped on this before, think that we need to put a serious effort into education focused at the foreign language communities. And I'm glad you brought up the Mandarin thing, because that is another heavily fishing community that is fishing now, that whether it's a regulatory compliance or catch and release techniques, that there are definitely a target there to improve all sorts of issues in the community. So I look forward to hopefully seeing more about foreign language outreach. I realize it's harder. I absolutely realize it's harder, but I always get concerned that due to how difficult it is, that we go with the layup opportunities as opposed to the more difficult ones. So I just strongly suggest going after those inner city locations that abut these access projects in the city that we know there are people using.
Yes, at 100%. And that's also why the decision was made to target the adult leaders within the community. Us as Kim and I as a DMF agency body, we don't feel like, it's our place to be running those clinics, but we do absolutely recognize it's our place to support and provide everything that those communities need to get those programs started. So we're really excited about that particular piece of access. And believe I have both of those clubs you mentioned on our list of contacts, but I will follow up and make sure that I have that.
Awesome. And I also just a comment on the cancellations. Even in 2021, so Mass Beach Buggy Association has received a grant, and we've been in a 2-year partnership with the National Park Service down in Provincetown about a surf fishing history day and a clinic, which is sort of like well planned out, well funded, the whole bit, well staffed, well volunteered. And we could not, even working with National Park Service educators, which have some of the most experience in the nation, working with people, we could not figure out a way to safely do a hands-on fishing instruction this spring. And we had to cancel it for the 2nd year in a row. And I'm like, it's the dream scenario. There's nothing we want that we don't have for the event, including PR and outreach. And we just couldn't figure a way to do it in a substantive manner. So I can appreciate the frustration of doing all that work and then not being able to. and absolutely support the decision. We couldn't figure it out. We, you know, like I said, with professional educators from the National Park Service, we couldn't figure out how to do a fishing clinic and make it safe.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Next, we have Mike Pearnock. Mike, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. Well done, Christine. That's a lot of work, and especially I was impressed with the booklet and the logbook for the junior angler. That's good stuff.
Thank you.
If I wanted to get that now, is that presently on a web page that I could go to at DMF?
Yes, so I have the Take Me Saltwater Fishing page up. I am going to load the book. So it should actually be physically printed next week. I received the proof in the mail on Tuesday, I believe. Once that proof is good to go and we're like, this is it, it will be going up as PDF on the website, so anybody can access that. And then as far as physical distribution of the books, I'm ordering 4,000 for this first 2-year period. The way I'm setting that up is hopefully being in contact with specific anglers and organizations and setting up times for them to come and pick up their books. So I am more than happy to give all of you a book. I think I'm going to frame mine on my wall as my 2020 thorn in my side. But yes, that should hopefully be, if not by end of next week, the following week, but there is a Take Me Saltwater Fishing webpage open and live now.
And hopefully you can forward us that link, some food for thought. I mean, especially with COVID, most of the young kids today were given iPads because they had to work from home. Because
I have a kindergartner.
Yeah, as Patrick made some good points there, and there's certain people that may not have them, and there's another mechanism you have to use to communicate with them and get them to participate with. But I know my granddaughter, who's in 2nd grade, I give her the phone or the iPad, she'll find it. So my question is, with that, if that's the mechanism they're going to take, can they go to the web page, open up the PDF, and then record, if they're going to keep a logbook, instead of having it in a paper copy, just record it in the PDF? Is there the ability to do that?
Yeah, the PDF does have all of the fields.
Good.
Thank
See,
goodness.
I'd have to ask my granddaughter. She'd tell me. I don't even know. So, but no, that's good. And that's just some food for thought, because all the schools, the kids got them. So it's another way to get that out. Even in the inner city, they all receive that because of COVID. So.
Yes.
Well done. Reel them in. Get the young kids involved. That's good stuff. Appreciate it. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Next, we have Kevin. Kevin, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. Again, great presentation and so much great work. And actually, my comments were pretty similar to Mike's. I was just curious. I saw that you had video links in the saltwater fishing guide. And I know from what we do here, I mean, we've been printing a magazine forever, but it's like the more video we can make, the better. And so I was just kind of curious how the saltwater fishing guide worked online, how the videos were integrated. And then the other thing I just wanted to say is always just to offer, as a media group, we should find some ways to partner. We could talk about that offline, but like you're doing such great stuff. I want to both help you increase reach in any way we can, and then also get you credit and get you so people can see what's going on.
That would be amazing. I think the marketing piece has been tricky for me to figure out. So 100%, I will definitely take that. So the videos that are, I think the first group of videos should be ready just before Memorial Day weekend. They will be, we have a YouTube series, so there's a specific page for those videos. There will be 7 videos in total, and then on the actual Take Me Saltwater Fishing.gov page, the videos will be embedded, and then there is thirdly a QR code on the book, as well as the written links. So there's 4 different ways to access the videos as you move through. we decided to not put a specific QR code on every single page that had a video link. It got very busy and jumbled. So that's just on the first page, the contents page of the book. But those will live on our .gov webpage and our YouTube channel. I think those were the questions. Oh, and the other side of the videos, so we finished half of them. We are going out with Ben Hagen and Bill Hoffman in June to shoot specifically the catch and release of striped bass. That's the fish that we're going to focus on. There's a section in this youth guide that specifically talks to the safe capture and release of fish and being mindful angler. So we're excited for that. We just had to wait for the season to kind of heat up a little bit. So those videos will be coming in July.
That's great. And see if you can get Ben and Bill to make some TikTok videos out there too.
I got addicted to TikTok last year. Don't put that on my brain. I will do it.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Kevin.
Khalil?
Thank you. Great job, Christine, and great job, Kimberly. A lot, you know, DMF has a lot of moving parts to it, and very often the public has no idea what DMF does. And the INE, information education part of any organization, is so valuable. And what you're doing is very valuable, and it just adds to the organization. And I just want to commend your department for what you're doing.
Thank you.
And at this time, we're running a little bit behind schedule. At this time, I'd like to take a 5-minute break and to come back. Let's say at 11:30. Let's say 11:35. Hey, Julia.
We're all set.
Thank you. We're going to resume the meeting. We're going to be, Mike, would you like to introduce the next speaker?
I would. So the next speaker is Brad Chase, who heads up our Diogenes Fish Project, which, as you know, is we added 2 biologists many years ago under this project, and they've really increased our capability. Brad?
Thanks, Mike. Good morning, folks. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Thanks. All right. I hope everyone's doing well. Could I have the first slide, please? So with the Diogenes Fish Project, one of the questions our staff often gets is how a river herring run's doing. And so I wanted to start off with a graph that shows the spawning run counts for the 4 rivers we have in Massachusetts that have over 20 years of data. There's over 30 runs that are counted in Massachusetts, but there's only 4 that go back over 20 years. So here they are. It's the Mattapoisett River in Mattapoisett, the Back River in Weymouth, the Monument River in Bourne, and the Nemasket River in Middleborough and Lakeville. So it's a simple index that combines the spawning run counts for the 4 rivers. The red line is the harvest ban that was put in 2006. And what you can see is a modest improvement since then. The period of 2012 to 16, people got excited because there was more fish in the runs. And then 2017, we had a decline. It was largely driven by really poor returns in the Nemasket River. A decent response since then. 2019, people were quite excited to see what they saw in the rivers. Last year dipped down a little bit. I don't have complete results for 2021 yet, but it's going to be a lower year. Some runs have done very poorly this year for reasons we're not certain of just yet. This graph won't look that much different because the Nemasket River had an average to better year. So it'll still be more than 1 million fish for these 4 runs. So we have seen modest improvements since the harvest ban. Next slide, please. So I'm going to recap 2020. A little too soon to do so for this year, but the DMF Fishway crew, which is made up of Ed Clark and Jimmy Rosendahl, conducted 5 jobs in 2020, which is pretty good with the conditions of the pandemic. These are small fishway jobs that take up to a couple of days to a week plus to complete. And I'll show some photographs on those in just a minute. We also picked up our efforts with stream maintenance last year. You know, we were restricted to what we could do. Some tasks had to be dropped. And so we thought it would be a good idea to get out and look for problems in the rivers and put some effort towards improving some of these stream channels. In some areas, this work has really diminished since the harvest ban. Some towns are kind of backing away from that stewardship. It's an odd dynamic. Some of it is aging herring wardens. Some of it is just losing sight of the importance of getting out and doing this work. And so we picked things up. We worked in 18 rivers, and we put large efforts towards work in the Fall River in Braintree, Jones River in Kingston, and the Acushnet River in Acushnet. Also, a couple large cooperative restoration jobs were completed last year. In Weymouth, the herring passage and smelt habitat restoration project was finished. That's the upper photograph. And what was happening there, there's a flood control tunnel that herring would go up into, as well as smelt every year. And often there could be large mortality events as fish were trapped. And so this created a diversion wall that you see that just doesn't allow fish to get in the tunnel anymore. It also had features to improve the migratory corridor for river herring, as well as a spawning habitat for rainbow smelt. So this was a 20-year project that was completed last year, with the town of Weymouth leading it and DMF providing lots of technical support and some funding support as well. And then the Baxter Mill Pond fishery was completed last year in Yarmouth. This was a large dam reconstruction, historic mill reconstruction, and included a fishway. It was led by NRCS, as well as the town of Yarmouth. And we got involved with early survey work, design work, and stayed with the project to assist the completion. And so that's a good one to see done. It was really quite expensive when you add up all the features. And then we also saw some good project with some of these large watershed-wide projects that have multiple sites, such as the Fall River in Braintree and the Jones River in Kingston. Next slide, please. And here is the Jones River watershed in Kingston. And so what this is a GIS data layer that DMF maintains. It has all sites in Massachusetts that have fishways. It has information on the species present. It has other obstructions included. And it has our locations for river herring, eel, and smelt monitoring. And it's a pretty simple approach. Where it shows green, fish can go. Where it shows red, they cannot go. And yellow indicates there's some type of work that could be done at that location. And so this takes us back to 2010 in the Jones River, when fish could not pass beyond Wapping Road. And so they couldn't access the 640-acre Silver Lake, which really represents a large amount of spawning and nursery habitat. So if you go forward to the next slide, here we are in the present day. The Wapping Road Dam came out in 2011. Then the Elm Street Dam came out in 2019. And DMF in the same year built a small wooden ladder up at Forge Pond Dam that gave fish access to Silver Lake for the first time in well over 100 years. So it's an example of one of these watershed-wide projects that are going on. It has lots of involvement from the Watershed Association, from the town, the Division of Ecological Restoration, lots of partners, and really a goal of extending migratory fish to their native habitats upstream. We're still working here. We want to install a more permanent fishway that accommodates multi-species. And that's a project that's going to see a lot of effort, hopefully in 2021 and 22. Okay, next slide, please. So back to the fishway crew jobs. Here are 4 of the 5 jobs that the crew did in 2020. The upper left is Weymouth Back River again. And this is when that tunnel project was being dewatered. It gave us a chance to get after some real degradation at the fishway there. It's been on our radar for a long time, and this was a good opportunity to get in there when the site was dewatered. And our crew patched a lot of cracks and holes in the fishway, and then resurfaced all the weirs where there was a lot of degraded, craggy concrete showing that would abrade the fish as they passed. And so this was the first year where it was working, and the local herring wardens were very pleased seeing the fish response through these newly surfaced weirs. Upper right is Herringbrook Park in Pembroke. We did a real big job that had us there for 9 weeks in 2019. We came back in 2020 and we wanted to add a couple extra concrete weirs and raised the walls in a few locations to try to improve the look. Very historic site, very scenic place. Lots of people come by while we're working there, and they just love seeing the modifications made to this location. That's good for the public as well as for fish passage. Lower left is the Indian Head River on the borders of Hanover and Pembroke. And this is a fishway the DMF Fishway crew built in 1970. Kind of remarkable that we did this way back then. It's 110 feet long and it required 123 cubic yards of concrete to make. So pretty amazing construction for a state crew. It's degraded at this point, it's getting older. And so we did a lot of rehab last year. We went in, we patched concrete, we installed new stop log slots that had completely failed at the entrance. We put in a trash rack. There had been no trash rack. And we found lots of shrubs growing in the fishway, lots of log jams, all kinds of stuff had entered the fishway and made it completely impassable. We removed broken baffles, replaced 13 baffles overall. So it was a pretty big rehab job for an important fishway that includes a lot of American shad in this system. And we'll come back, I think, in the next year or two and try to continue to replace some of the baffles. There's 37 baffles in all. And then lower right is Bourne Pond in Falmouth. And here's a new fishway we built in 2016. With a couple of years of operation, we realized it needed an extended entrance pool to allow fish to acclimate to the first weir. And so our crew got in there this past summer and we formed up a concrete entrance pool for that fishway. So just a few examples of jobs we got done. I think it was a pretty good year, given all the limitations we had. Next slide, please. And a little more on stream maintenance. Again, we picked up our efforts this year. Sometimes we're going out and we're just finding problems like a log stuck in a fishway. Other times we're finding really dense jams of vegetation growth and tree falls. It's rugged work. We take whatever crew we can find. And sometimes we put waders on almost anybody that will show up. And but I think the upper left photograph shows what we deal with quite a bit. And that's when you have a tree fall or a series of tree falls that are neglected for a number of years. And then plants will come in and they'll grow and they'll set roots. And pretty soon you can have a condition where the riverbank, the water just overtops the bank and goes around this. And you've got a completely impassable situation. And that's in the Jones River in Kingston. And we probably found 6 of those like that. And it's just a complete mess that has to be cleaned up and removed. And so again, lots of effort in 2020. Again, this year, we were pretty busy in the spring. And related, we're working with the Department of Environmental Protection to try to come up with a policy on stream maintenance. It's actually somewhat in limbo given state laws. And we've been asked to have pretty high permitting loads lately, permitting requirements to do this work. And it's really not, it's something that's been done for centuries. And we're hoping to develop a policy with DMF and DEP that will allow this to happen without extensive permitting. So that's what I have today. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Mike Piernock, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you for the presentation. I don't need a detailed response other than you noted a few different runs that are significantly down. Can you, just summarize what the top 2 or 3 runs that have significantly reduced numbers?
Well, the big story, I think, on the South Coast right now is the Herringbrook and Pembroke. And the run count there, we did some restoration last year. I showed a graph during this discussion on how great that run has improved since we did some work there in 2011. That run has steadily improved, reached over 400,000 fish. Last year, it dropped down to about 150, and we were concerned. This year, the counts are riding at about 40,000. So there's a site that has shown really a quick tumble. And there are many other small runs where the counts are extremely low. And so, we are concerned about that. The Jones River in Kingston, we put the fish ladder in. The next year, the count estimate was 1,500, which isn't many, but I mean, that's fantastic for a site that hasn't had fish for so long. This year, they haven't counted a fish there. We've seen a few outside of the count, but some of these small runs are really doing poorly this year. And so it is a matter of concern.
Just one question. We probably have to take this offline, but I live on White Island Pond. And Glen Charlie Road, where that is, that's where it starts. And there's loads of ospreys there picking off the herring. Then they go up and they'll go past the campground. There's been a lot of work done at that campground. I looked at it and thought possibly it was associated with your program to clear that up, to help the run as it goes farther up and goes up those ladders in the Agawam. Do you know, is that DMF doing that work there, or you're not aware of it? And if not, I would suggest somebody take a look, because ultimately, I'm not seeing the herring I typically would see in White Island Pond. I saw tremendous numbers 5 years ago, and for some reason, they don't seem to be there in the numbers they were in the past, which makes me wonder whether there's something blocked to prevent them from getting up. But we can talk about that later. I just wanted to throw that out there. I didn't know if anything came to mind quickly. If not, we'll talk offline.
Yeah, just briefly, we brokered a deal. The town of Plymouth had a lot of extra fiberglass baffles in storage, and we got those baffles over to that location. And so there was a lot of baffles that were placed, and the town did the work. We just simply facilitated the arrangement of transferring the baffles. That's a site where the town let go their two wardens a few years ago. And so they've kind of had a reduction in that effort, that stewardship. I mean, they're still doing a pretty good job, but in terms of having people get out to all the little locations where things can go wrong, I don't know if it's happening there. And yes, that run did show a nice peak around 2014, 15, and it has scaled back since then.
Yeah, if we could follow up offline, that'd be great. Thank you.
Sure.
Julio?
Thank you very much. Great presentation, Brad. Very important. I'm from the North Shore, and I'm wondering, the couple of questions and comments maybe. Have local organizations such as Trout Unlimited, the various watersheds, Ipswich River Watershed Association, have they reached out to you? Or if they haven't reached out to you, should they reach out to you, or are they able to reach out to you to talk a little bit more about the herring run up on the North Shore? I know Ben has and his crew has put in a monitoring system at the Alewife Brook in Essex, and the run is a lot greater this year than last year. And I know that they come up. I'm going to talk about the Alewife. They come up into the Alewife and then into Tobacco Lake, Essex, Hamilton. Then they cross from a little area into Round Pond. So is there a way for these organizations? I know that it's very important for the young to get back, the young of year to get back into the ocean. And sometimes they hatch and they grow, and then what happens is they get trapped because of a situation like you have with the trees being down or the water drying up. Is there a way for organizations to contact you to ask for advice as to how they can deal with their own little local situation?
Yeah, and I think we do a fairly decent job with that. You know, Ben's continuing the work that we've done up there. I'm working with the different watershed associations in the Parker River, the Ipswich River, the Essex River. And so I think we're doing okay, but probably we could use a little more help, I think, in focusing on some of this stream maintenance work that needs to be done. And it would be nice to get some of those groups. So we always try to connect with the watershed associations. They have some of the most interest in stewardship out there. And then we connect with the towns. And I'll mention to Ben, you know, your question and just ask him, are there locations where we can do a little bit more? Coincidentally, Trout Unlimited has been critical of us at times for stream maintenance work because they want to see the streams left alone for trout. But I can tell you in some of these locations, the degradation to aquatic life includes trout. And so, you know, when you've got stream banks, you know, the streams braiding and leaving the channel and forming wetlands in the floodplain, it's not good for aquatic life or trout. So it'd be nice to try to get along better with Trout Unlimited and maybe work together in some locations. So those are definitely two things we can work on.
Yeah, thanks for that. And by all means, I think Ben is, you get limited personnel trying to deal with all these little runs. Ben, I personally feel Ben is doing a great job with it. So believe me, there's no criticism directed at Ben whatsoever. But it would be nice if these local organizations could reach out to you and work collaboratively with you and DMF and a little local, the state, interaction. I think it'd be great. But Ben's doing a great job, I think. And I don't want you to think that was a criticism against Ben when I made the initial comment.
No, not at all, Khalid. He's doing a great job up there. And it's something we can focus on because we get so much more done by working with locals in every case. And so we always can look for more opportunities to do that.
Yeah, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Patrick. Patrick, you can unmute yourself.
Hey, Brad, thanks. First of all, congratulations on the tunnel there at the Back River. The 2020 was the first year that I did not receive a message from Mr. Phil, and that was awesome. So congratulations. A second question. Is there any update on the overall situation with the dams on the Neponset, or is it still just stuck in political hell?
Yeah, that's something we would love to see some progress in. I think the past feasibility studies found some real difficult sediment situations for the removal concept. And so that just stalled that concept. We've worked quite a bit with the owner of the dam, Department of Conservation and Recreation at other locations. And what I've discussed with Ben Gahagan recently was, in the next few years, we want to identify places we can make some progress, get back to some concepts. And I said, I want the Neponset River to be high on your list. And whether that could be to restart the removal project or to have some type of modified breach or even a fish ladder, that's a river that needs to have improved passage.
Yeah, no, I'm very aware. I was on that. Matter of fact, I think Paul Diodati is the one who got me on it. That legislative citizens committee there that went through the whole bit with the designing a possible natural fishway and the whole PCD removal thing. I continue to say and have said in public, and it's a very controversial statement, that the wrong color people live along that river, and that's why that river continues to be ignored. It's just the fact that it runs through inner city neighborhoods is punished that particular river, because if it was the Charles or the Mystic, it would have been worked on. But I just wondering if you had any update. That's all. I very much realize that's a situation that, that goes, there's politics involved there and the whole bit. But I just inquiring, that's all.
All right, thanks. And one item I think you'd be interested in, Patrick, which I meant to mention earlier. We did receive last year 2 requests from towns on opening harvest of the towns of Pembroke and the towns of Harwich. And so we are working on a plan. We've got a draft plan for the town of Harwich that's nearly ready for review. And Pembroke, we're taking a little pause given what has happened there, which is really kind of astounding to see that decline. But either way, we've had 2 towns that have discussed an interest, and that will be, they'll be moving to a public review process fairly soon, at least for the town of Harwich.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing any other hands.
All right, that being said, we can move on. But before we do, I just want to say, Brad is the master of understatement. What he presented today is the pinky finger of what he does for the project. They are doing so many things, and we'd be here all day if we presented everything. And the addition of the 2 biologists, which is Sarah Turner and Ben Gahagan, have really raised the quantitative capabilities, in addition to their involvement with all the maintenance and the restoration and the monitoring. They also have side projects. You saw Ben's genetic study, and Sarah's put out papers on reducing the bycatch of river herring and midwater fisheries. So for the sake of brevity, that was an awesome presentation, but he could go on, and he has. And I also want to acknowledge Greg Scommel, who both MRIP and Diogenes answer to him, and he doesn't get any credit in these presentations at all, but he is the one that keeps the balls in the air. And at the end of the day, I take credit for it all. And so it's a great synergy. Thank you, Greg. So I wanted to acknowledge him. Moving on, oops, lost the agenda. All right, artificial reefs, and Mark Russo on our habitat project heads this up, and he couldn't attend today, so I will try to give his presentation and answer questions, maybe if we have some. So he continues to the three different things he's involved is constantly acquiring materials to use on reefs, and he has been very successful. You know, we have a whole stockpile of things ready to deploy now. And by statute, we have to monitor anything that goes out in the water once a year. So he dives and monitors and videos, that sort of stuff. And they published a paper on the recolonization of a reef. And then he spends an awful lot of time, as you've all heard, of trying to site and permit new sites. Primarily in southern Cape Cod Bay is what he's working on now. And these sites always should be, you know, in areas that don't have a lot of structure. And so we've identified several of those. Next slide, please. So in terms of material acquisition, we are leasing a 1 acre site at the New Bedford waterfront. And this is, we may get into a conflict with the windmills, because this is supposedly going to become a staging area for the windmill deployment. So we're playing that by ear, but we are almost completely filled that 1 acre with 2,000 cubic yards of primarily granite, which is just fantastic material for reefs. He worked with the Mass DOT to clean out some of their highway depots where they have a lot of surplus materials in terms of concrete catch basins, all sorts of things like that, things with cracks in them that they actually have to pay to get rid of. So they're very happy to work with us. And he's working to see if we can make sure we can stay on this site for at least a year more. And it looks like that'll be fine. And then he's working with the Coast Guard to deploy some more, these are the anchors to their navigation buoys, and they're massive and they're concrete. And we already had them do it once. They had, I can't remember how many there were, 20 or 30 of them. And they deploy it themselves, right, with their buoy tender. And so we tell them where to put them, and they're happy to do it. Because again, it saves them from having to bring them to land and the cost of getting rid of them. So he's working with them to get more of those, and great reef material. So I think at this point, we need to start thinking. We have funded deployment before, and we have enough materials to do that. So this panel should probably think about, do we want to fund some deployment? And we did it under public access, and it really is a form of public access because we don't have a lot of other sources of money in our agency to fund this sort of thing. So I'll leave it at that, food for thought. And next slide. As I said, by statute, we have to monitor all these reef sites. So they have continued to do that. And we only supply a small amount of money out of our budget, which is for some overtime, boat time, and some dive materials. And then they've had a couple of publications, and they have a grant proposal now to examine these reefs as fish habitat in our embayments. Next slide. And it's for siting and permitting. a big thing that's been going on is looking at areas in southern Cape Cod Bay, and it's progressing, but it's progressing slowly because of core permits and every other permit. And we do have to consider commercial activity, particularly surf clam. We have to consider the right whale critical habitat. So it takes a while. So right now, I think Mark is concentrating on the eastern two areas you see on that chart. So to the east of, is that Barnstable Harbor? Because those look like the most promising. And we do have to keep monitoring this low dissolved oxygen blob that has formed in the last 2 years. We do not want to put in an area that is subject to low dissolved oxygen. And so we're monitoring that. So we're moving forward. And I think that may be it. Next slide, if there is one. Oh, okay. So Mark, I put this in. Mark was out monitoring the reef 2 days ago. So it's, the middle of May. Excuse me, let me hang up this phone. And he was on the Yarmouth Reef that we deployed with fund money. And there were over a dozen boats on the site at 9 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday in May. And just catching sea bass and a few scaup and cunner. And he was there several hours. He said different boats came and went, but all day long, it was really utilized. So these reefs, when properly placed in sort of, well, I hate to use the term barren, but sort of featureless bottom, become tremendous habitat for fish and therefore tremendous fishing spots. So I just wanted to use this to illustrate that this is a really valuable project that we're doing. So we may pitch you for some more money out of the fund to deploy these things. And I'll leave it at that. Any questions?
Patrick, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, thanks. That was Tuesday. That was opening day of Black Sea Bass too, Mike, I think. But that was not where my question was going. I'm very much thank you for bringing up the dissolved oxygen thing, because the minute you started talking about it, I went, geez, is that near the dissolved oxygen locations? I mean, I'm definitely in favor of continuing the reef project. But one question was, and you guys are probably doing this, but we definitely need to have a decent amount of thought regarding the conflicts with potentially both commercial and recreational lobster buoys peppering those sites outside of Barnstable. The two commercial lobstermen that work that area are extremely aggressive, and there's definitely already sometimes conflict with recreational lobstermen and recreational fishermen with those two commercial lobstermen. Also, there is this history of artificial reef development down in the mid-Atlantic and in Jersey, where those conflicts have gotten to become serious problems. So I just want to make sure that as we develop them, which I'm in favor of, that we're thinking about how that gets handled up front.
Yeah, that's a good point. As you know, on the Yarmouth Reef, we prohibit commercial activity, and there wasn't a lot of pushback because there's no lobstering. There were some conch pots and such, and we had a public hearing, and they didn't care too much. But lobstermen are different, and if this is their prime habitat. That being said, the footprint of these things is pretty tiny, but we will consider a prohibition because it is difficult to fish if you have a bunch of vertical lines in the water. But
all four of those locations that you just showed outside of Barnstable Harbor are peppered with Billy Lister's traps.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll have I'll relay that information to Mark, and we may just have to do a couple of periodic trips to that area and observe the buoy concentration, things like that.
Just putting it on your radar. I'm in favor of it. I want to see it. I just, this is sort of an easy one that we need to think of.
Yeah. That's a darn good point.
Mike Piernock.
Thank you. With the chart that had the proposed locations on it, are those proposed, or have the permits been submitted for approval? Where do we stand in that process? Are you still evaluating, or we're past that?
Oh, Mike, I hesitate to give the specifics because, Mark would have to comment on that. I don't know if the application, there's a number of applications, different entities. I don't know where they're at, but you know what? I'll find it out when Mark's available.
If I recall from a few years ago, there was a thought to group all under one permit for one submittal. So I don't know whether that was the approach, but I was just curious.
Yeah, he does want to submit one thing for all of them, but we may eliminate some of the sites. His feeling is the ones to the west are not as. I don't exactly know why he's come to that conclusion. But
I agree. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'll find it out for you.
I'm all for this. I go to Florida. We go to Florida. You fish in Florida, they're everywhere, and there's a significant benefit to that, and having access to something near shore. I wanted to note that the citation in there about the Woods Hole proposed artificial reef study. Stellwagen Bank Charter Boat Association supports it and will be part of the team providing input on that. We're kind of looking at it from or the association's looking at it from a different standpoint, that if you have these artificial reefs, and they're successful and you increase the number of them, ultimately the effort out at Stellwagen Bank may go down. So once again, it's about creating an artificial reef effect, getting the fish there, having access near shore that could help significantly for those with smaller boats and so on. So I'm all for this, and I hope things proceed positively with this. Thank you.
Yeah, ultimately, we will get permission, and but we're probably a year away, something like that. All right.
Patrick, we have one more question.
Yeah, well, no, I was just, the one thing I had meant to say when I was talking about in another part of it is that there is clearly on the north side between, let's just say, Yarmouth and the canal, like a growing population of tog, of blackfish. There is a growing population of winter flounder that's coming out of the blue the last couple of years. And these reefs would absolutely benefit all of us, the 4-hour fleet, the private anglers. I mean, I can't agree with Mike more. I mean, it's a diversity thing. It's an ecosystem thing. I think they're great locations if we can figure out how to regulate them right.
Great. All right. Let's move on to the next, which is I've lost my agenda again. The recreational stock assessment. And I'll just say a couple of words because we fund this position. So the person in it now is Sam Truesdale. We've had a bit of people come through this position and leave after a couple of years because we've brought in some very talented people. And unfortunately, the feds pay a lot more than us. So we strive to keep them here. And Sam is a Massachusetts local, and his family's from around here. So like Gary Nelson, we managed to keep him because he's a Massachusetts guy. So we hope to keep Sam around for a while. Tremendously talented. And he has raised our capability representing recreational interest at ASMFC on bluefish, fluke, scup, black sea bass, winter flounder, and some other panels, ancillary panels. He's been involved in some analysis for MRIP at the national level with implications for improving that locally. I've been talking to him about possibly implementing MSE, which is Management Strategy Evaluation. It's a new technique of where you get all the stakeholders together and say, what do you want this fishery to look like? And then go through a number of scenarios quantitatively of whatever you're going to change, size limits, bag limits, harvest, whatever. And we're thinking of maybe applying that to some of our fisheries. And he's actually one of the experts on the East Coast on that from his PhD work. And the final thing he's doing, and he's doing much more than that, and I can't even talk off the top of my head of all the things he's doing, but he's spearheading our black sea bass work in Buzzards Bay and Nantucket Sound, which is looking at the spatial area of reproduction and the age and sex structure of these spawning aggregations. And there's a lot more work to be done, and we hope to throw money at that when we can. So I'll leave it at that. Any questions about the funding we give to recreational stock assessment?
Not seeing any hands.
All right. Yeah, that one's cut and dry. But it is valuable use of the rec permit money. And finally, but not least, fishing access. Ross, take it away.
Let me get my video going. Good morning, everybody. And just so you guys know, the reason why Sam wasn't here himself today, I just spoke to one of the people he's working with. He's out doing assessment work on sea bass today as the season is now in full swing, as Patrick pointed out. So I'm going to start with goings on since our last meeting. At the beginning of our last meeting, I did point out that Deer Island is open. It's all but done. Salem Willows engineer is currently taking place. Small grants moving along. The Wareham Narrows Pier that I discussed as well at the last meeting is complete. And I've got some future projects. So next slide, please. Okay, taking a step back. For any of you who have fished at the east end of the canal at the Scusset end, John DeCoster was the park supervisor there for a number of years. And this spring he had a fall, shattered his arm, realized he was riddled with cancer. He made it about 2 more weeks. And it's a big loss. And I just want to take a moment and point out that, you know, he will be missed, and he was an important person in our little world of fishing. I know that Patrick pointed out that when the Scusset Pier was out of commission a number of years ago, that was my introduction to John when we worked cooperatively to get that pier back open again. Anyhow, next slide, please. Okay, so as a Deer Island, as you know, it's open. It's mostly complete. The top coat of asphalt was actually added this morning. Tomorrow, line striping will take place, which is the end of all real construction. I've been working with Doug and FBA, and we will be putting up some signage, but that's kind of window dressing at this point. I've also been working with the commissioner and other people to set up a ribbon cutting, which is preliminary, as I understand at this point, will be June 24th. That could change. And that's something that will come out of our offices. I'm sure I've seen that the rec panel will be included in a ribbon cutting for that event. Next slide, please. All right, Salem Willows, engineering is ongoing. As part of engineering, this is pretty cool. Our engineer uncovered an image of the original plans as they were submitted in 1894. Permitting was much easier back then. This is all that was required. I'd love to say that that's the case today. It's not. What will be taking place likely this summer is demo of the existing pier. It has become an incredible, attractive nuisance. People are sneaking out there. There's planks missing and all kinds of things. Fortunately, it's a very cooperative project in that the city and our engineer are working together on permitting. Salem happens to have a guy named Seth Luttrell who's very good at permitting. and is going to work on at least that portion and hopefully help our engineers with some of the other stuff, maybe buffer some of our costs. Mike Armstrong and his wisdom figured out a way to do a cost share to get this pier built and not hamstring our public access dollars for the next 35 years. So that's great. We hope to go to construction as early as next summer. With the way I see things working, that might be a little bit optimistic, but nothing ventured, nothing gained for sure. Okay, next slide, please. Small grant. We have 3 grants that we awarded this year. Beverly will be performing routine maintenance on a pier. They'll be buying planking. Planking is very expensive currently, especially to keep that pier open, which is right next to the harbor master's office. Danvers is surveying, providing signage and clearing public ways to water. I think that this is an innovative and brilliant use of money. How many towns have lost public ways to water by creative landscaping by abutters? Great project. Chilmark was actually not an original awardee. What ended up happening was the Buzzards Bay Coalition, which you see at the bottom of the list, was unable to complete their construction this year, and they would not have been able to put in receipts before the end of the fiscal year. So Chilmark had been actually kind of late in getting their application in. It was very incomplete. I worked with them to sort of figure out what was going on to make sure it conformed to what we were doing. I gave them working with other people in DMF. So we just did a swap. What would likely have been awarded next year gets awarded this year, and the coalition will get a place to build a stone pier, repair a stone pier, vessel landing on Wickets Island. In Onset, this will be a place to be great for tying up for kayaks, for people who want to go shore fish over there, and any number of other things. Next slide, please. Wareham Narrows. We discussed the cost share of this at the last meeting. We were ready to go to construction, I believe, almost directly afterwards. The company that did this work, it was seamless and flawless. A lot of things came together. And I mean, they got done early, they got done on budget. They did, there was a few minor changes they asked for. They didn't ask for any extra money at the end of the project. I'm still in shock waiting for something to go wrong, because something always goes wrong with these projects. And that's about it. It was a cost share with FBA, and the town of Wareham was great to work with. Next slide, please. So as always, I just want to show the spread along the coast of how equitably we have given money and provided projects. One thing that was pointed out, I think Patrick pointed out at the last meeting, was that we're really missing stuff in sort of the Mount Hope Bay area, and we are looking right now at Somerset and Fall River, which I think will finish those pieces of the puzzle. I know that we have a land management agreement with Dighton as well. I don't know, I think that would probably be something along the lines of a car top access, because we could probably do that on fairly short money comparatively. Let's hope we could move forward with completing this map and moving on more projects. Next slide, please. All right, future projects. I'm actually going to go off of this one, but also off the one I went through in the past. Like I said in the last slide, we're working with Somerset and Fall River. As we discussed the last time, Lynn is doing some major gentrification or cleaning up of degraded waterfront areas. They have approached us in the past about reviving the fishing pier there. That would be something we would likely have to work with DCR on, as they own the decrepit pier, which is there now, which is really a danger for people to be on. Mike Moss has brought this concept up a number of times along the canal, as we do have the Scuffet Pier at the east end. I think we sort of brainstormed the idea of small turret-like piers along the canal for people who are less abled, or at least not rock hoppers anymore. I gotta say, I'm glad to see Mike here today. I know he missed the last meeting. And I mean, I have a whole list of about 10 projects that could move forward. And our biggest issue is we're more budget constrained than we are project limited. We also know that building materials and services we've seen incredible increases in cost in the last couple of years. We saw that great increase in the price of steel when we went to construction at Deer Island. So I'm personally hoping that the increase in the cost of the rec permit will go through, and at least it's been discussed that a lot of those funds will be dedicated to public access. I'd like to be as busy as I have been the last few months working with getting Deer Island wrapped up and moving on with Salem, but I'd like to have 3 or 4 projects at a time that we can work on. And I mean, that would be a great thing. I mean, it would provide to the youth what, a lot of the access that we had as kids that have just simply been marked off by no trespassing signs in today's day and age. I don't know if I have any more slides or not. Click it, we'll see what's there. Oh, questions, yeah. Okay, so I'm happy to entertain any questions you guys may have.
I'm not seeing any hands.
One thing I'd like to add is that we will be having a grand opening of the Deer Island Pier before I forget. And you, of course, will all be invited. We believe it's going to be June 24th. Is that right, Ross?
That's what I've heard thus far from Bob Greco. I mean, that's what he's
so
proposed.
we have sent an invite up to the Secretariat and to the governor's office and to various senators and reps, and we hope they can all make it. But we're waiting to hear back if that date's going to work for them. So if you all would, if you're interested, and I hope you do, come June 24th. It'll probably be, late morning, something like that, 11 o'clock. Actually, we were looking at the tides, and I think the tides are good. We want it to be high. And in conjunction, we're working with the Fishing Academy, who does a whole bunch of angler ed things for inner city youth primarily, and we've asked them to put a group together who once we cut the ribbon can immediately go out on the pier and start fishing. So anyway, pencil that in, and sorry that was sort of a non sequitur, but I wanted to get it in before forgetting. So back to Ross's stuff, if there's any questions.
Ron, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. Yes, Michael, you're correct. June 24th is the date that we have reserved for now. And if we don't hear back by the close of business tomorrow, I'll push that issue. But I think that is a good date. So everyone should kind of pencil that into your calendar right now. And as it becomes more of a reality, we'll get you all of the details. But that is going to be a very big event.
I see that Mike Moss has his hand raised physically, not in his computer. Mike, can you unmute yourself, or someone unmute Mike, please?
I just asked him to unmute.
There it is. Yep.
Just wanted to comment on why we still considering that place on the canal. I'd like to get the opportunity to work with you on somewhere to get going there before most people get too old. The dedication, I'm glad to see that. And Ross, thanks for all the work you put into getting that thing going when it was completely stopped. Anything on the Marion Wareham possibility on the river?
On the Wee Wee Antics site, currently DOT is looking to rebuild the bridge that abuts that property, and that would, because of sea level rise, as it has to be considered in the permitting process and in construction, That's it's actually going to make access to that property harder. And I think that's probably, to deal with property values, certainly not an expert at that. DOT is looking at potentially leasing. I've heard, heck, let's try and get them to buy it and give it. And I don't know beyond that. I went to a meeting a couple of years ago with them, and I mean, I think Doug or Ron, have you heard anything further about that in the last year and a half, let's say?
That bridge is in pretty bad shape. It'd be good if that could get done. There's a lot of activity in that little corner
There sure is.
right now, knocking all along them. Well, anyway, all the best to, I've been kind of inactive. I apologize for that, but it doesn't seem though I can change it.
I believe Ross is correct. That is the status that I recall as well, that we're waiting to hear back from DOT's next move. And if they proceed ahead with what their plans are, that should in fact make it easier for us to get a facility there.
Yeah, that's good. Maybe they'll all connect. Well, thanks for your efforts there. That's all I have.
There's a lot more detail if you'd like to discuss that in a couple of days or so as well, Mike. It's just, it would take a lot of time. And I mean, it's sort of details at this point.
Yeah, all right.
Well, let's talk. Okay.
Next, we have Patrick. Patrick, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ross. I first want to appreciate you for mentioning John. He was a hero when it comes to access. I mean, from literally the year he took over Scusset, the problems with fishermen at Scusset Beach like disappeared, or at least were significantly lowered. Talk about a good guy. Yeah, I mean, it's a personal friend too. Yeah, and I just wanted to a personal request. Any news on that 24th date, please let me know either way, whatever it is. It's really important for me to be there on the 24th, and I am leaving to go out of state in 23rd, so I'm gonna make some serious changes, but so that I can get down there. But any info on that date, the sooner the better.
Will do.
Khalil?
Thank you. I appreciate it. If I could describe Russ with a couple of words, and that would be persistence and perseverance. I can remember a couple of springs ago when it might have been about 4 or 5 of us from DMF who went to the Winthrop public hearing in I think the high school auditorium. It was packed, and we were definitely outnumbered. There were a couple of times during the evening I felt I should have my back against the wall, because I thought it was fairly hostile at the time. And Ross didn't let up. He had a conviction, and if you had told me that evening whether this project was going to move along or not, I had some serious doubts about it. But he really stuck with it, with the support from DMF and from other groups, and as a result of his persistence and perseverance, this thing has come to life and fruition, and it's going to benefit a lot of people, especially those people who don't have access to the water via boat. This is a way for them to get out there and to enjoy, doing what people like to do, and that's to go fishing, especially in the salt. So Ross, I have to commend you. You've done a great job. You really have.
Thank you for those kind words.
I'm not seeing any other hands.
Okay, with that then, why don't we move on to item number 5? We're back on schedule, and we're going to have Mike Armstrong talk about the fiscal year 22 fund appropriations, etc.
This is the money. You want to come here, man?
What's that?
All right, so Do you have a slide? There it is. So you all have a hard copy of this too, in case you can't see this very well. But you've heard about all the projects we fund, and this is the funding. And again, you've heard this before. I haven't done a lot of changes here, mostly because we haven't needed to. And so the bottom line is very similar to last year. We've had the governors, I guess we've had the House and the Senate, but we don't have a conference number yet. So it looks like the worst case scenarios will be level funded, which we can survive. I think the Senate's was up a little bit, so remains to be seen. So we'll operate on the governor and House budget, which is similar last year. So there's no surprises here. Trying to think of the things that I changed. The salaries, they've all gone up, most of them, not all of them, because of step increases. None of us have contracts anymore. They all expired last June, so there were no union raises. They may be coming this year, which means we'll have to reconfigure some stuff to pay for those, but it's usually not a huge amount. So anyway, the biggest changes are just a tiny bump up, 1 or 2% in salaries, and everything else, I believe, is the same. I did notice I made a mistake. If you look under fishing access, you'll see supplies, and under that was 75,000. We normally budget a few thousand for various supplies that Ross needs. But last year that budget included 75,000 for the redecking project that we finished. And I forgot to move that. So we can just take that 75 grand and put it into the large project, which will be, that'll bump it up to, 500,000. So fishing access comes out to greater than 33% this year. I think it's more like 35, 37, something like that. That's okay. And again, that 500,000, we'll finish paying for Deer Island, but we won't have a lot of charges in this fiscal year for Salem. And so we probably won't spend all that. And if we don't, it rolls back in. The great thing about our fund is it's not fiscal year based. The appropriation is, but if we don't spend it, it just goes back into the fund. And that's not true of most state accounts. You have to spend it or lose it. So that's good. And everything else is the same, except the genetics for Ben is gone, but I've kept the acoustic terminal tackle study and bumped it up a little bit. So we can buy a whole bunch of tags so that our sample size will be right. And after this year, so we'll do the Circle versus J again. And then next year we'll start, we haven't decided what to look at, but there's a whole bunch of things in terms of discard mortality. And to be honest, we want to become the experts of release mortality on the East Coast, because you know what? It's needed and no one else is doing it. So we want to look at treble hooks. We want to look at handling time and just handling fish. And I suspect when it's warm out, the way you handle a fish out of the water may be more important than anything else that happens to that fish in terms of mortality. So if you folks go along with it, you'll see funding for mortality, release mortality, and as long as I'm sitting in this chair, which is a few more anyway. So I guess I'll leave it at that. Not much change from last year, except a few things that I mentioned. So any questions?
Well, thank you, Mike. Hearing none. The budget's always, excuse me, Nicola?
I'm not seeing any hands.
Okay, well, Michael, thank you so much for doing that presentation for us.
Yeah, thank you. And, you know, thank you all for allowing us to do what we do. I am awestruck at my staff, to be honest. You get,
You know, it's not a large amount of money, but what is being done is really phenomenal. So
it really isn't a lot of money. And, you know, it's, in most cases, it supplements what the division already is doing in many cases. And that was the intent. The folks who were on the panel early on were insistent that we were not going to replace state money. We were going to add to it. And I think we've accomplished that goal.
yeah, I think so also. Thanks, Mike. Well, let's move on.
Hang on, I have a question from Patrick. You can unmute yourself.
I didn't know if the chair was looking for a motion, but I would also like to comment that beside the fact that this is, I agree with what was just said, and the lack of questions on the budget is because of how wonderful the presentations have been throughout the meeting. The one thing that I think it's really important to remember is that with both our license and DMF in general, but if you spend any time seeing what other states do and learning what other states do, by far in advanced, maybe besides Florida, which is a completely different animal, like this state is not head and shoulders, waist and shoulders above what anybody else is doing. The state of New Jersey doesn't do a quarter of what we do for its anglers with our license money.
Thank you, Patrick.
This is Nicola. We do typically look for a motion to accept the spending plan. So if Patrick, if you're interested to make that.
I'm happy to make the motion to approve it as presented.
May I have a second, please?
Mike Piernock, second.
Any discussion? Let's move to the motion. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those against? The motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much. Well, let's move on to number 6, and that would be from Nicola Meserve, who will be talking about free fishing days.
Thanks, Khalil. This is our quick annual check-in on the free fishing days where the permit is not required. A couple of years ago, we selected the Father's Day weekend as the default option due to the favorable weather and the inherent focus on family and the variety of species that could be targeted at that. So that's what we'll roll forward with in 2022, unless there are suggestions from the panel to make a change. The image on the screen is what we put in our saltwater guide to note the free fishing days, along with the information about how to get your permit. And we're also working with Mass DOT to see if we can get the days put on the billboards again this year. And we'll be looking at other advertising opportunities as well.
Thank you, Nicola. Any questions, comments?
Hey. Yes.
Mike Moss.
I think we should stay with Father's Day weekend. It's a family thing. It should be targeted as a family thing every year. I think it's worked so far from the comments I hear. And I don't think we need to look for another day.
I'm not seeing any other hands.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Nicola. With that, we're going to move on to other business, and we're going to move to panel member comments. And why don't we just start with Mike Piernock?
I am good. Thank you.
Kevin?
Great presentations. I have nothing else to add.
Mike Moss?
Very good presentations, and thanks to all those involved making this thing happen. Special thanks to Ross Kessler for the work he's done on access. A lot of extra time has been spent there, and probably some of his own. Thanks for all of you. And thanks for dealing with me today.
Thank you. Patrick?
Although I will pray that the secretary cannot make the 24th and that the date has to be backed up, outside of that, I would just make one request that those planning the event consider inviting past panel members. That Deer Island facility was targeted from meeting one, and it'd be cool to see like Chuck Casella and maybe some others, Billy Smith, that have served before, at least be invited. And beside that, thank you for a wonderful meeting, and thank you for being an outstanding chairperson, Mr. Bogdan.
Thank you. Thank you. And I second that also. This did not happen with the immediate past 2 or 3 years, this public access. So I second what you said about that, Patrick. I think past members should be invited to this great event. I would like to just say that, you know, putting on a meeting like this doesn't happen in a vacuum. It really does not. And, you know, we really need to recognize, you know, several people, and Nicola Meserve being one of those. She does just so much. It's incredible the amount of duties that she has with the division. Julia Kaplan for hosting it and being a monitor of what's going on with us, and you know, taking care of the business behind the scene. Jared for, you know, sending out the announcements, announcing that and giving us our sign-in information. These 3 folks, plus I'm sure I missed someone, and I'd be embarrassed if I did, but I'm sure I missed someone. But they just do a great job. If everything at DMF does not happen, you know, in a vacuum. As I've said, there's so many things happening. And one of the great things that I've been introduced to about 5 or 6 weeks ago were the Tuesday 11 o'clock lunch seminars. And if you haven't tuned in, and it's open to everybody. And I have to apologize to Christine Cassidy. I missed hers. I just couldn't make it. And because I wanted to hear her presentation on information education. But I've been tuning in every Tuesday. It's easy for me to do. I'm retired. I can carve out some time. But it just goes to show that DMF is just not striped bass, bluefish, black sea bass. There's a lot more to what goes on in the marine environment. And these seminars really that are put on by the members of DMF, just it highlights what goes on an everyday basis. And I'm just so proud of all the different things that go on with the Division of Marine Fisheries, which actually, they really don't get very much recognition, but which is so important and vital to the importance of keeping our marine environment functioning at optimum under the conditions, environmental conditions and industrial conditions and that go on. So these seminars are on every Tuesday. And I'm sure you know we could get the information to you as to how to sign on. It's very easy. It's an hour, but the information that is produced and seminars are so important. When I was working for my PhD, and I don't mean to go on and on, but I just can't speak highly enough of these seminars. When I was working for my PhD, I look forward to all the seminars that the various graduate students were putting on, because it just allowed me to see and to learn all the different aspects of research and all the different things that are going on in the fields. So I would urge everyone to just attend these meetings if you can. With that, I'm going to ask if there are any comments from the public.
Doesn't look like we have any attendees, so we can.
Okay. With that then, Michael Armstrong, I'm going to bring it back to your deliverables.
All right. First, thank you for those kind words. In fact, we recorded them. We will transcribe them, and Kevin can put that as an article in his magazine. It'd be awesome. I'm just kidding, Khalil. So to recap, I don't think there are a lot of deliverables, just some general ones I wrote down. I do want to follow up with Mike Fairnock, get him the information on the sites where we're at. We will continue. So this panel did approve us moving forward with an increase in the fee in some form. So we will continue to pursue that and with the commissioner's support. And, you know, it'll take some time and it has to be done gingerly and all that, but we will move that forward. We will firm up the June 24th date and get back to you as soon as possible, or change it if it has to be and let you know. And relevant to what you just said, I don't know if I don't think we, oversight on our part, we probably didn't send invites to the seminar series. Khalil and Mike Greenart got them because they're part of our Marine Fisheries Advisory Commission. But if you guys would like, we'll send you the link to those. They are coming to an end, I think, in a couple of weeks for the summer because everyone gets so busy, and then we'll resume them in the fall. And that's all I've got. So in terms of scheduling the next meeting, Khalil, do you just want to kind of ad hoc it? We'll look at the schedule.
Yes, well, yeah, we should do that. We should get, you and I can talk about it with Nicola and come up with something. By statute, we do need to meet twice in a calendar year. So last year, our second meeting was in December. So let's put our heads together and see if we can come up with something that's amenable to everybody. We'll put out the doodle again, and we'll pick out a date, and we'll have another meeting with a lot of great information.
I have a question from Patrick. Patrick, you can unmute yourself.
Just wondering if we can get one of those lovely information and education people to help get Dr. Armstrong a background that has, you know, the ZACM or the Sagamore, or at least the Massachusetts located bridge.
I can do that. I was going to apologize for this. So I got a brand new desk and rejiggered my office because of, you know, being home. And unfortunately, there's a window right behind me and I don't have the new blinds yet. So you would all just be blinded by the light and I'd just be washed out. So I put the is that the Golden Gate Bridge? Is that what it is?
Yeah, yes, it is.
Yeah.
Okay, and any other business? With that, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Michael Moss, motion to adjourn. Second?
Second.
Who said? I couldn't get that. Who did that?
Mike Pearnock, second.
Thank you so much for the second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those against, motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much for attending. A lot of great information. Look forward to